The man appeared in the warehouse doorway without warning, stepping into the pool of sickly yellow light like he'd been summoned. He couldn't have been more than 40, with salt and pepper hair swept back and a face that held too much authority for the dead silence that followed his arrival. 20 armed men straightened instantly, guns still trained on me. "You're the concierge," he stated, studying me with unsettling calm as he crossed to a scarred wooden table. "The one who opened my package." I blinked, looking around the circle of weapons for an exit, an ally, anyone who might interrupt this obvious execution. The concrete walls swallowed my shallow breaths. "I'm sorry, is this the part where I beg? Should we skip to where you shoot me?" "I don't beg." I straightened in my chair, zip ties cutting into my wrists. The ledger, the one I'd photographed and hidden, felt like it was burning a hole through my memory. "Can we just talk for a moment?" Every instinct told me to stay quiet, to not antagonize the man they called Il Silenzio, the silence. But the thought of my son waking up tomorrow without a mother, of these monsters winning, made something crack open in my chest. A laugh. Sharp. Bright. Echoing off the walls like broken glass. 20 men flinched. Before continuing the story, please consider giving this video a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more stories to you. Bernardo Fiorentino, the most feared man in the Italian underworld, slowly lowered his newspaper. His dark eyes locked onto mine with the kind of focus that probably preceded most deaths in this room. "You think this is funny, Miss Blair?" "I think it's hilarious." My voice came out stronger than I felt. "Do you know what I found in your package, Mr. Fiorentino? Not drugs. Not weapons. A ledger." I leaned forward as much as the restraints allowed. "Your own men have been robbing you blind for 6 months. Skimming shipments. Redirecting payments. And you, I let the pause breathe, let every man in that room feel it. You had no idea." The temperature dropped 10 degrees. "So I'll ask you directly, since we're all here together." I smiled, the kind of smile that came from having nothing left to lose. "How does it feel to be useless, Mr. Mafia Boss?" Bernardo didn't move. Didn't blink. But every single gun lowered an inch as his men held their collective breath, waiting to see if their boss would murder the woman who'd just made him look like a fool. Instead, he did something worse. He smiled back. 12 hours earlier. The problem with being good at your job is that people start to rely on you for things that definitely aren't in the job description. "Michelle, I need you to sign for a package." I glanced up from my desk in the lobby of the Imperium Hotel, where I'd spent 3 years perfecting the art of being invisible while simultaneously indispensable. Marcus, our night manager, looked nervous, which wasn't unusual. Marcus always looked like he was one guest complaint away from a breakdown. "What kind of package?" "The kind that came by private courier. For the penthouse." He slid a clipboard across the marble desk. "Guest checked out this morning, but apparently this was delayed. They want someone reliable to receive it." Reliable. That's what single mothers became, professional handlers of other people's problems. "Fine. But I'm clocking overtime for this." The courier arrived at 11:47 p.m., right as my shift should have ended. He was young, early 20s, with the kind of nervous energy that screamed first job in organized crime. The package was a reinforced envelope, sealed with red wax that bore an impression I didn't recognize. "Sign here." He thrust the clipboard at me. "Don't open it. Don't scan it. Just don't." He was gone before I could ask questions. I should have followed his advice. But when you're a single mom working 2 jobs to keep your 9-year-old son in a decent school, when you've spent years being walked over and ignored and treated like you're disposable, sometimes you get curious about what makes powerful people nervous. I opened it in the hotel's back office. The ledger was small, leather-bound, filled with columns of numbers and names. It took me 15 minutes to realize what I was looking at, a meticulous record of theft. Someone inside an organization had been documenting every stolen shipment, every skimmed payment, every act of betrayal against someone named BF. My hands shook as I took photos with my phone. By the time I'd resealed the envelope, 2 men in expensive suits were walking through the lobby. "Package for Bernardo Fiorentino," the taller one said. No greeting. No pleasantries. I handed it over with my best concierge smile. All intact. No issues. They left without a word. I thought I was safe. I was wrong. Now, the warehouse, midnight, your name appeared in the courier's call log. Bernardo's voice was soft, almost conversational. He'd finished folding his newspaper, setting it aside like we were having tea instead of discussing my imminent murder. You handled his package for 47 minutes before transfer. Long enough to read it. Copy it. Sell it to my enemies. I didn't sell anything. Then why open it? The honest answer, because I'm tired of being powerless, felt too vulnerable. So I went with sarcasm instead. Curiosity. Bad habit. Probably why I'm zip-tied to a chair. One of the men behind me, a boulder of a human with neck tattoos, slammed his palm on the table. Show respect, putana basta. Bernardo's single word cut through the warehouse like a blade. Silence. He stood, circling my chair with the measured pace of a predator. I could smell his cologne, something expensive, cedar and smoke. When he leaned down, his mouth was inches from my ear. You laughed at me, Miss Blair. In front of my men, that requires consequences. Your men are stealing from you. I turned my head, meeting his eyes. I'm not your enemy. I'm the only person in this room telling you the truth. And why would you do that? Because my voice cracked. I thought of my son, of his face when I didn't come home. Because I have a 9-year-old who needs me alive. And because the man who's betraying you? He's been delivering packages to our hotel for 6 months. I know his route, his schedule, his face. Bernardo straightened, his expression unreadable. You're offering to help me. I'm offering to be useful. I held his gaze. Which is more than I can say for the 20 men you've got pointing guns at someone who could solve your problem. The silence stretched thin. Then Bernardo laughed, a low, dark sound that made my stomach drop. Talia Lacord. Cut her restraints. A knife flashed. The zip ties fell away. I rubbed my wrists, not quite believing I was still breathing. Bernardo returned to his chair, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. Sit, Miss Blair. Tell me about this traitor. And then his smile was all teeth. We'll discuss exactly how useful you're going to be. I sat. And realized I'd just made a deal with the devil. The only question was whether he'd save me or destroy me first. The silence after Bernardo's command felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I sat across from him at that battered table, acutely aware that 20 guns remained in the room, that my freedom was purely theoretical, and that I had approximately 60 seconds to prove I wasn't bluffing. You said my men are stealing from me. Bernardo's voice carried the kind of calm that preceded violence. Bold claim from a hotel employee who opened the wrong package. Not the wrong package, I corrected, keeping my spine straight despite every muscle screaming at me to run. The right package at the wrong time. And it wasn't just bold, it was accurate. He leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. In the harsh overhead light, his features were all sharp angles and calculating intelligence. This was a man who'd built an empire on reading people, on knowing when they lied. I needed him to see I wasn't. Explain. I took a breath. The ledger in that envelope documents systematic theft over 8 months. Someone's been skimming from your shipments, redirecting payments, falsifying inventory reports. Small amounts at first, nothing that would trigger immediate suspicion. But it's accelerated. Last month alone, nearly 200,000. One of the men behind me scoffed. She's inventing stories, quiet. Bernardo didn't raise his voice, didn't even look away from me. The interruption simply ceased to exist. Continue, Miss Blair. The entries are coded, but the pattern is clear once you know what you're looking for. Wednesday deliveries consistently show discrepancies. The Route 9 driver always reports delays. And there's a name that appears in the margins 17 times. I paused, letting the number sink in. Giacomo. The temperature in the warehouse dropped 10 degrees. Bernardo's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes, recognition, maybe anger, carefully controlled. Giacomo Russo is my logistics coordinator. He's been with my family for 12 years. Then he's been planning this for at least 8 months and executing it beautifully, I said. Right under your nose. While you sit in your office reading newspapers and assuming loyalty is permanent, someone you trust is dismantling your operation brick by brick. You photographed the ledger. It wasn't a question. I did. Why? The honest answer lodged in my throat, because I've learned the hard way that information is the only real currency people like me have, because I needed insurance, because being invisible my whole life taught me to grab proof when it appears. But Bernardo was still deciding whether to kill me, so I chose a simpler truth. Because I knew someone would come looking for it. And I knew whoever sent that ledger to you, probably Giacomo's rival or a guilty accountant, was risking their life. That seemed worth preserving. Noble. His tone suggested he didn't believe in nobility. Or calculating. Can it be both? The corner of his mouth twitched. Around us, his men shifted with visible discomfort. Their boss was being challenged by a woman in a hotel uniform who should have been begging for mercy, and no one knew quite how to handle it. Bernardo stood abruptly, and my heart kicked against my ribs. He walked to the warehouse's grimy window, looking out at the industrial wasteland beyond. If what you say is true, Miss Blair, then you've exposed a cancer in my organization. That would make you either very valuable or very dangerous. He turned back to face me. Possibly both. I vote for valuable, I said, trying to ignore how my hands trembled. Dangerous seems counterproductive given my current situation. Your current situation is that you possess information about my business that could destroy carefully maintained relationships if released publicly. You also demonstrated questionable judgment by opening confidential materials. His gaze pinned me to the chair. Why should I believe you won't sell those photographs to my competitors? Or the authorities? Because I have a 9-year-old son who needs stability more than he needs a dead mother, and I'm smart enough to know that crossing you guarantees the latter. The words came out sharper than intended, edged with the exhaustion of working double shifts and the terror I'd been suppressing for hours. I don't want your money or your empire. I want to go home, tuck my kid into bed, and forget this night ever happened. That's simple. That's simple. Bernardo studied me for a long moment, and I forced myself not to look away. Whatever he was searching for, weakness, deception, leverage, I couldn't afford to show it. What did you do before the hotel? He asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. I was getting a degree in forensic accounting. Had to drop out when I got pregnant. Forensic accounting. Something like amusement crossed his face. So you're trained to find exactly this type of discrepancy. I'm trained to follow money trails and identify fraud, yes. Though usually in more legal contexts. Usually. He returned to the table, pulling out his phone and typing something rapidly. Giacomo is scheduled to oversee a Wednesday delivery tomorrow night. Route 9, as you mentioned. If your information is accurate, he'll be there. He will be. And if you check the ledger's last entry, you'll see tomorrow's shipment is already marked for a 20% skim. He's gotten comfortable. Sloppy. Bernardo's fingers stilled on his phone. He looked at me with something I couldn't quite read, surprise, perhaps, or the beginning of respect. You memorized the entries. I have a good memory for numbers. It's why I was good at my job before life got complicated. He pocketed his phone and signaled to someone behind me. Take Miss Blair to the car. The comfortable one. She's a guest now, not a prisoner. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by suspicion. A guest? Until I verify your information, you remain close. If you're telling the truth, you've done me a considerable service. If you're lying. He let the sentence hang, unfinished and infinitely threatening. Well, let's hope you're not lying. 2 men appeared at my sides, not grabbing, just present. I stood on shaking legs. And Miss Blair. Bernardo's voice stopped me at the doorway. That laugh. That question. No one speaks to me that way and lives. My throat went dry. Then I guess I'm already dead. No. His smile was knife-sharp and genuinely amused. You're useful. Much more interesting. The comfortable car turned out to be a black Mercedes with leather seats that probably cost more than my annual salary. I sat in the back, flanked by 2 silent men who smelled like expensive cologne and barely concealed violence. Neither spoke. Neither looked at me. They simply existed as human reminders that I wasn't free, no matter what Bernardo called me. We drove for 40 minutes, leaving the industrial district behind for tree-lined roads that whispered of old money and older secrets. My phone had been confiscated, temporarily, they assured me, as if that made it better. All I could think about was Liam waking up at my neighbor Rosa's apartment, asking where Mommy was and Rosa's increasingly frantic calls going unanswered. "I need to call my son," I said for the third time. The man on my left finally spoke. "When Mr. Fiorentino permits it. He's 9. He'll be terrified. You should have considered that before opening packages that didn't belong to you." I bit back a response that would definitely get me killed and stared out the window instead, watching mansions grow larger and further apart until we turned through iron gates that probably had their own security detail. The estate sprawled across what had to be 20 acres. The main house was a masterpiece of old-world architecture, stone and arched windows, and the kind of grandeur that came from generations of wealth, not lottery wins. Manicured gardens stretched into darkness, fountain sculptures catching moonlight, everything positioned with intimidating precision. We pulled up to a circular driveway where Bernardo stood waiting, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked less like a crime lord and more like someone from a cologne advertisement, which somehow made him more dangerous. "Miss Blair." He opened my door himself, a courtesy that felt like a test. "Welcome to Villa Fiorentino." I stepped out, hyper-aware of armed men positioned at every strategic point around the property. "Is this where you bring all your reluctant guests?" "Only the ones who make me laugh." He gestured toward the entrance. "Come. You must be exhausted." Exhausted didn't begin to cover it. I'd been awake for 22 hours, terrified for most of them, and my body was running on pure adrenaline and maternal panic. But I followed him up marble steps into an entrance hall that belonged in a museum. Crystal chandeliers. Original paintings that I recognized even with my limited art knowledge. Floors so polished I could see my reflection, rumpled uniform, tangled hair, eyes too wide with sustained fear. "Maria will show you to a room," Bernardo said as an older woman appeared from a side corridor. She wore a simple black dress and the expression of someone who'd seen everything and judged none of it. "You'll find clothes, toiletries, whatever you need. We'll talk in the morning." "I need to call my son now." I didn't move toward Maria. "Not in the morning. Now." Bernardo studied me with that unnerving focus. "Your neighbor, Rosa Delgado, apartment 4C, was contacted an hour ago. She was told you're handling an emergency for a VIP hotel guest and will return tomorrow. Your son is asleep. He's safe." The relief was staggering, immediately chased by fresh anger. "You researched me." "Of course I researched you." Michelle Elizabeth Blair, 29, employed at the Imperium for 6 years. Exemplary record. Single mother. No criminal history, not even a parking ticket. You're exactly what you appear to be, confident, careful, and currently in far over your head. Then let me go home. After tomorrow night. After Giacomo. He moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back. "You exposed a traitor, Miss Blair. That makes you valuable, yes. But it also makes you vulnerable. If Giacomo suspects someone revealed his operation, he'll look for loose ends. You're a very obvious loose end. So this is protective custody. This is pragmatism. You stay here where I can ensure your safety and verify your information. When Giacomo is dealt with, you return to your life." Simple. Nothing about this was simple, but arguing seemed pointless. I was so tired my bones ached. "Fine. One night. Then I go home." "Of course." His smile suggested he didn't believe me. "Maria, please make our guest comfortable." Maria nodded and started toward a sweeping staircase. I followed, then stopped halfway up. "Mr. Fiorentino?" He'd been walking toward what I assumed was his study. He turned back. "Yes. Earlier, in the warehouse. You said no one speaks to you that way and lives. But you let me live because I'm useful." I met his gaze across the elegant space between us. "What happens when I stop being useful?" The question hung in the air. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. "That," Bernardo said quietly, "is an excellent question. I suggest you remain valuable, Miss Blair." He disappeared into the study, leaving me on the stairs with Maria, who looked at me with something approaching sympathy. "Come, dear. You need rest." The room she led me to was larger than my entire apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in linens that probably had a thread count higher than my credit score. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking the gardens. The attached bathroom featured a shower with more settings than my car. Clothes in the wardrobe, Maria said, opening doors to reveal options in exactly my size, another unsettling reminder of how thoroughly I'd been investigated. If you need anything, press the button by the bed. Someone will come. Someone. Not help. Not a friend. Someone. Thank you, I managed. She paused at the door. He's not what people think, you know. Mr. Fiorentino. What is he then? Lonely. She said it matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. And impressed, though he'd never admit it. You stood up to him. Most people can't manage that. Most people have better survival instincts than I do. Perhaps. Maria smiled slightly. Or perhaps you simply understand that sometimes the most dangerous thing is showing fear. Sleep well, Miss Blair. She left, and I heard the unmistakable sound of a lock engaging. Guest or prisoner, Bernardo could call it whatever he wanted. The lock told the truth. I walked to the French doors and tested them. Locked. The balcony was 2 stories up with no convenient trellis or escape route. I was thoroughly, elegantly trapped. Through the windows, I could see lights still burning in Bernardo's study. I imagined him there, reading through that ledger, planning whatever came next for Giacomo. Planning, perhaps, what came next for me. I pulled out my phone, then remembered they'd taken it. Somewhere across the city, Liam was sleeping, safe and unaware. I clung to that thought as I finally collapsed onto the absurdly comfortable bed, still wearing my uniform, too exhausted to even find the clothes Maria had mentioned. Tomorrow I would figure out how to escape this gilded cage. Tonight, I simply closed my eyes and hoped I'd wake up at all. I woke to sunlight streaming through silk curtains and the disorienting realization that I wasn't in my cramped apartment. For 3 blissful seconds, I thought last night had been a nightmare. Then I saw the wardrobe full of designer clothes and remembered exactly where I was. A note sat on the nightstand in precise handwriting. Breakfast at 8. Your phone has been returned with 1 contact added. Use it wisely. My phone lay beside the note. I grabbed it, finding dozens of missed calls from Rosa and 1 new contact simply labeled B. I didn't need clarification on who that was. Rosa answered on the first ring. Michelle. Dios mío, I've been worried sick, I'm fine. I'm so sorry. Is Liam okay? He's eating cereal and watching cartoons. Asked about you twice, but I told him you had an important guest emergency. Her voice dropped. Michelle, who called me last night? The man who said you'd be delayed, he sounded. Intense. Terrifying. It's complicated. I'll explain everything when I'm home. Can you take Liam to school? I'll pick him up this afternoon. Of course, but I have to go. Thank you, Rosa. I owe you everything. I ended the call before she could ask more questions I couldn't answer. The clock read 7:30. 30 minutes to make myself presentable for breakfast with a man who could make me disappear with a phone call. The wardrobe held clothes that fit perfectly, tailored pants, silk blouses, even jeans in exactly my size. I chose the jeans and a simple sweater, some small rebellion against being dressed like a doll. The bathroom offered luxury products I'd only seen in hotel suites I cleaned but never stayed in. When I finally made my way downstairs, following the smell of coffee and the sound of low voices, I found Bernardo in a sunlit dining room that overlooked the gardens. He wore casual clothes, dark jeans, a fitted Henley looking more human than he had in the warehouse. Almost approachable, if you ignored the man stationed by the door with a gun poorly concealed under his jacket. Good morning, Miss Blair. I trust you slept well. As well as anyone sleeps in a locked room. I took the seat across from him, accepting coffee from Maria with a grateful nod. The lock is for your protection. Or my imprisonment. Tomato, tomato. He smiled at that, genuine amusement crinkling the corners of his eyes. You're remarkably unintimidated for someone in your position. I'm terrified, I corrected, loading my plate with fruit and pastries. I'm just better at hiding it than begging. And I have exactly 7 hours before I need to pick up my son from school, so let's discuss how this day works. Bernardo set down his espresso cup. You're not picking him up. Ice flooded my veins. Excuse me. Marco will pick him up. He gestured to a younger man who'd appeared in the doorway, mid-20s, clean-cut, looking more like a graduate student than muscle. He'll bring Liam here, where you'll both stay until after tonight's operation. Absolutely not. I stood so fast my chair scraped against marble. You are not sending a stranger to my son's school, and you are definitely not bringing him into whatever this is. This is ensuring you don't run. Bernardo remained infuriatingly calm. And ensuring Giacomo can't use your son as leverage if he discovers your involvement. The logic was sound, which made it worse. I wanted to flip the table, to scream, to demand my freedom. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, to think like the forensic accountant I'd almost been instead of the terrified mother I was. If Marco picks him up, Liam will be scared. He doesn't know Marco. He'll think something happened to me. Then you'll call the school, explain there's been a change, and introduce Marco via video chat. Bernardo pulled out his phone, already thinking 3 steps ahead. Your son will see you're safe, meet Marco in a controlled setting, and understand this is temporary. And what do I tell him about where we're staying? What do I say about you? The truth, modified. You're helping a hotel client with an urgent matter. We've offered you accommodations. It's a small adventure. He leaned forward slightly. Children are resilient, Miss Blair. And Marco has 3 younger siblings. He knows how to handle a 9-year-old. I looked at Marco, who offered an awkward wave. He did look harmless, almost kind. But this was insane. One night, I said firmly, "We stay tonight, I help you with Giacomo, and tomorrow Liam and I go home. That's the deal." Agreed. The ease of his agreement made me suspicious, but I didn't have leverage to negotiate further. I pulled out my phone and called Liam's school, then FaceTimed my son during his lunch break. His face filled the screen, chocolate milk mustache and all. "Mommy, where are you?" "Hey, baby. I'm still helping with that special guest project. It's going to take a little longer than I thought. Do I have to stay with Rosa again? She makes me eat vegetables." Despite everything, I laughed. "No. A very nice man named Marco is going to pick you up today and bring you to where I'm staying. It's like a mansion, Liam. There's probably a pool." "There is," Bernardo said quietly from across the table. Liam's eyes went wide. "A pool? Really? Really? But you have to promise to be good for Marco, okay? He'll be there at 3 o'clock. I made Marco join the video call, let Liam see his face, establish the password they'd use, astronaut pancakes, Liam's current favorite phrase. My son seemed more excited about the pool than concerned about the disruption, which either meant I was handling this well or traumatizing him in ways I'd pay for in therapy bills later. After the call, I sat back, exhausted despite the caffeine. This is insane. This is necessary. Bernardo stood, buttoning his jacket. "I have business this morning. You're welcome to use the grounds, the library, the pool. But don't leave the property. Because I'm a guest, not a prisoner?" "Exactly." He paused at the door. "And Miss Blair? Your son is lucky. Not many mothers would face down armed men to protect their children." "Every mother would," I said. "You just don't usually give us the opportunity." Something flickered in his expression, respect, maybe, or recognition. Then he was gone, leaving me with Maria, Marco, and the growing certainty that my normal life was never going to be quite normal again. I spent the morning anxiously pacing the grounds, watched by discreet security. At 3:15, Marco's car pulled up the drive, and Liam burst out like a rocket, eyes huge as he took in the estate. "Mommy, this place is like a castle." Marco let me pick the music, and there's actually a pool, and he crashed into my arms, and I held him tight enough to make him squirm. "Easy, buddy. I missed you too." Over his head, I caught Bernardo watching from an upstairs window. Our eyes met across the distance, and something unspoken passed between us, acknowledgement, perhaps, that he'd just seen the only thing in the world I'd actually die for. He nodded once and disappeared. I held my son closer and wondered what I'd gotten us into. Has there ever been a moment when protecting someone you love required trusting a stranger? What choice would you make in Michelle's position, run or stay? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe for the next part of the story. Liam lasted exactly 90 minutes before the novelty of the pool wore off, and he started asking questions I couldn't answer. Where did the man who owned this house work? Why did everyone look so serious? Why couldn't we just go home? Maria saved me by appearing with fresh towels and an offer to show Liam the estate's library, which apparently included a first edition collection of children's books. My son's eyes lit up. He'd inherited my love of reading along with my stubborn chin, and he followed her inside without a backward glance. I was still standing by the pool, dripping and anxious, when Bernardo's voice came from behind me. He's a good kid. Smart. I turned to find him watching from the terrace, still in business attire but with his tie loosened, looking like he'd had the kind of day that aged people prematurely. He is. Which is why I need to get him out of here. After tonight. He gestured toward the house. Come. There's something you need to see. I grabbed a robe from the pool house and followed him through corridors I hadn't explored, past rooms that spoke of generations of wealth, until we reached what appeared to be a private office. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk, and windows overlooking the gardens. He locked the door behind us. The ledger sat on his desk, its pages spread open like evidence at a crime scene. You were right, Bernardo said without preamble. Giacomo has been systematically stealing for 8 months. But after examining the entries more carefully, I've found something disturbing. He pulled out a chair for me, surprisingly courteous for a man who'd had me tied up 24 hours ago, and sat across the desk. The amounts are too precise. Too calculated. I leaned forward, studying the familiar columns. What do you mean? Here. He pointed to an entry from 6 months ago. Giacomo schemes exactly 15%. Not 14, not 16. Always 15. And look at the dates, every other Wednesday. Like clockwork. Consistent patterns make embezzlement easier to hide in plain sight, I said, slipping into the analytical mode I'd learned in school. If the losses are predictable, they look like operational costs instead of theft. Exactly. But Giacomo isn't an accountant. He's logistics, muscle, and coordination. This level of financial sophistication requires someone else. The implications settled over me like cold water. You think he has a partner? I know he does. Bernardo pulled out another document, a bank statement with several transactions highlighted. These deposits align with the skim dates, but they're going to an account Giacomo doesn't control. The beneficiary is registered through 3 shell companies. I scanned the statement, my rusty forensic training kicking in. The routing numbers, the careful layering of transfers, the amounts slightly offset from the stolen, sums to avoid direct correlation. Whoever set this up knows corporate finance. They've created plausible deniability at every layer. Can you trace it? Maybe. Probably. But I'd need access to more records, cross-reference the shell companies, look for overlap in registration dates or shared addresses. I looked up at him. This isn't something I can do in an afternoon. This is weeks of investigation. Bernardo was quiet for a moment, studying me with that unnerving intensity. You're enjoying this. What? The puzzle. Following the money. You miss it. I wanted to deny it, but he was right. For the first time since Liam was born, since I'd traded my degree for diapers and double shifts, I felt the sharp satisfaction of using my brain for something besides remembering room service orders and guest preferences. I miss a lot of things, I admitted. But that doesn't change reality. I have a son to raise and bills to pay. Financial investigation doesn't exactly fit into my schedule. It could. He leaned back, fingers steepled under his chin. After tonight, after Giacomo is handled, I'll still need to identify his partner. The person who designed this scheme. I could use someone with your skills. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you an opportunity to finish what you started. To use that expensive partial education. His eyes held mine. And to be compensated appropriately for your expertise. The offer dangled there, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Money to give Liam stability, to finally finish my degree, to stop living paycheck to paycheck. But working for Bernardo Fiorentino meant stepping into a world I'd only glimpsed, one where people disappeared and loyalty was enforced with violence. I need to think about it. Of course. But for now, he pushed the ledger toward me along with a laptop. Help me understand what we're looking at. Walk me through the pattern. I pulled the computer closer, and for the next 2 hours, we worked. Bernardo proved surprisingly sharp, asking the right questions, connecting dots I'd missed. He brought up financial records I definitely shouldn't have access to, and I pretended not to notice how easily he navigated systems that should have been secure. The pattern that emerged was damning. The shell companies all traced back to registration addresses in the same legal district. The transfers followed a rhythm that suggested someone with intimate knowledge of Bernardo's payment schedules. And one name appeared in the corporate filings more than once, buried in the fine print. Dante Castellano, I read aloud. He's listed as a corporate officer for 2 of the 3 shell companies. Bernardo's expression went dangerously still. Dante is my cousin. He handles legal affairs for the family business. Your cousin is stealing from you. My cousin is family. The words came out hard, edged with something that might have been betrayal or grief. He sat at my father's funeral. He's been to my home, eaten at my table. I understood then the real cost of what we'd uncovered. This wasn't just theft, it was a wound that went bone deep. I'm sorry, I said quietly. Don't be. You gave me the truth. Most people don't have the courage. He stood abruptly, walking to the window, shoulders rigid with controlled fury. Giacomo was the visible thief, the distraction. Dante was the architect, hiding behind him. What happens now? He turned back, and the man I saw wasn't the sophisticated businessman or even the dangerous crime lord. He was someone who'd just learned that family meant less than he'd believed. Now I confirm it. Tonight's operation catches Giacomo. Then we gather evidence against Dante that even he can't deny. His smile was razor-sharp. And you, Miss Blair, are going to help me build a case that destroys him. I thought I was going home tomorrow. Plans change. He moved to the door, unlocking it with decisive finality. Your son is safe here. You have access to everything you need. And tomorrow, after tonight's confrontation, we'll discuss more permanent arrangements. You're not giving me a choice. I'm giving you exactly what you wanted, a chance to be useful. To matter. To finish something that requires your particular skills. He paused in the doorway. Unless you'd prefer to return to the hotel, to pretend none of this happened, to wonder for the rest of your life what you might have accomplished if you'd been brave enough to try. The words hit harder than they should have, striking at every insecurity I'd buried under pragmatism and survival. That's manipulative. That's honest. He held my gaze. I need someone I can trust to trace this money, someone outside my usual circle who can't be compromised. You need resources and purpose. We can help each other, Miss Blair. Or you can walk away and spend the next 20 years wondering what if. He left before I could respond, leaving me alone with the ledger, the laptop, and a choice that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff again. Through the window, I could see Liam in the garden with Maria, laughing at something while armed men watched the perimeter. My son, safe in a gilded cage. My skills finally valued. My future, suddenly uncertain in ways both terrifying and electric. I looked back at the computer screen, at the web of shell companies and stolen money, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. The dress appeared in my room at 6 o'clock, delivered by Maria with an expression that suggested she knew exactly how out of my depth I was. Midnight blue silk that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, with a neckline that walked the line between elegant and dangerous. Mr. Fiorentino requests your presence at dinner, Maria said, laying out jewelry I was afraid to touch. There will be guests. He asks that you play a specific role tonight. What role? His companion. His interest. She said it delicately, like discussing the weather. Several associates will be present, including Mr. Castellano. Your job is to appear charming, attentive, and completely unaware of business matters. So I was bait. Or camouflage. Possibly both. I have a 9-year-old son sleeping down the hall, who is being watched by Marco and won't wake until morning. He's already been fed, bathed, and read 3 stories about space exploration. Maria's expression softened slightly. This is important, Miss Blair. Mr. Fiorentino needs Dante to believe everything is normal. That means appearing involved. 2 hours later, I stood in front of a mirror barely recognizing myself. The dress fit like it had been made for my body specifically, which, given Bernardo's resources, it probably had been. Maria had done something magical with my hair, twisting it into an elegant updo that exposed my neck and shoulders. The jewelry was simple, but clearly expensive, diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement. I looked like someone who belonged in Bernardo's world. The illusion was terrifying and intoxicating in equal measure. Bernardo waited at the bottom of the grand staircase, and the expression that crossed his face when he saw me made my breath catch. He'd traded his casual attire for a tailored black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and the controlled power in his stance. But it was his eyes that stopped me, dark and intense, and focused on me with an attention that felt almost physical. "Miss Blair." His voice was lower than usual, rough at the edges. "You look expensive?" I descended the stairs carefully, hyper-aware of the unfamiliar heels. "Like good camouflage." "Stunning." He offered his hand at the bottom step, and when I took it, electricity shot up my arm. "Thank you for doing this." Did I have a choice? No, but I'm grateful anyway. His thumb brushed across my knuckles, deliberate and distracting. "Tonight, you're Michelle. Not Miss Blair, not the concierge. You're someone I'm pursuing. Someone I find fascinating enough to bring into my private world. So I act smitten. You act like yourself. Sharp, unafraid, interesting." He tucked my hand into the crook of his arm, and the casual intimacy of the gesture felt rehearsed and genuine simultaneously. "That's what will sell this. Dante expects me to eventually take a companion. He just doesn't expect her to be paying attention." The dining room had been transformed. Candles everywhere, the long table set for 8, crystal and silver catching the light like stars. 5 people were already seated, men in expensive suits, one woman in a dress that made mine look modest. They all looked up when we entered, assessment in their eyes. "Friends," Bernardo said smoothly, his hand moving to the small of my back. "I'd like you to meet Michelle Blair." "Michelle, these are my associates and family." Dante Castellano sat 3 seats down, late 30s, handsome in a calculated way, with the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. He stood, raising his glass in a toast. "Bernardo, you've been holding out on us. Where have you been hiding this beautiful woman?" "I haven't been hiding her. I've been keeping her to myself." Bernardo pulled out my chair, his hands lingering on my shoulders just long enough to feel intentional. "Michelle works at the Imperium. She's the reason VIP guests keep returning." "Hotel work," one of the other men said dismissively. "How did you two meet?" This was the test. I could feel Bernardo's attention on me, waiting to see if I'd stumble. "A package mix-up," I said, accepting wine from a server. I handled something for Bernardo personally, and he was persistent about expressing his gratitude. Dante laughed. "Persistent. That's our Bernardo. Once he decides he wants something, he doesn't stop until he has it." I'm beginning to understand that. I met Bernardo's eyes across the candlelight, and the heat there wasn't entirely fabricated. It's both frustrating and flattering. Dinner progressed through multiple courses, conversation flowing around business I pretended not to understand. Bernardo played his part perfectly, hand on my knee under the table, leaning close to murmur explanations of inside jokes, looking at me like I was the most interesting person in the room. The touching felt natural, his attention genuine enough that I had to remind myself this was performance. But my body didn't care about performance. Every casual brush of his fingers, every low comment meant only for my ears. Every moment his thigh pressed against mine sent heat pooling low in my stomach. "So Michelle," Dante said during the 3rd course, his tone too friendly. "What do you think of Bernardo's work? His business ventures?" The question was a trap. Too much knowledge would expose me. Too little would seem suspicious. "I think," I said carefully, "that Bernardo is very good at managing complex systems. At seeing patterns others miss. At knowing who to trust." I let my gaze linger on Dante just long enough to plant a seed. Though I imagine that's challenging when people aren't always what they seem. Something flickered in Dante's expression, uncertainty, maybe concern. Beside me, Bernardo's hand tightened on my knee, approval in the pressure. "Wise words," Dante said, raising his glass. "To seeing clearly." "To truth," Bernardo countered, his eyes locked on his cousin. However uncomfortable. The toast hung in the air, weighted with meaning only some of us understood. After dinner, guests migrated to the terrace for drinks and cigars. Bernardo kept me close, his arm around my waist as we stood at the railing overlooking the gardens. To anyone watching, we looked like new lovers stealing a moment alone. "You were perfect," He murmured against my hair, the words sending shivers down my spine. Dante is unsettled. Did you see how he kept watching you? Hard to miss. I was intensely aware of his body against mine, the heat of him, the cedar and smoke scent I was beginning to associate with safety and danger in equal measure. Is this really necessary? The touching. Dante is watching us right now. So yes, it's necessary. His hand splayed across my hip, possessive and warm. Unless it bothers you. It bothered me that it didn't bother me. That I wanted to lean into him, to see if his lips felt as firm as they looked, to discover if the chemistry crackling between us was real or just excellent acting. I should check on Liam, I said, needing distance before I did something stupid. Soon. His breath was warm against my temple. A few more minutes. Let Dante wonder what we're discussing. Let him worry. So I stayed, trapped between Bernardo's body and the railing, hyper-aware of every point of contact. Behind us, I could hear Dante's voice, strained with forced casualness. In front of us, the garden stretched into darkness, beautiful and dangerous like everything else in this world. Michelle. Bernardo's voice was rough, and when I turned my head to look at him, his face was inches from mine. What we're doing, is fake, I finished, needing to say it. It's an act. Is it? His eyes dropped to my lips and the air between us thickened. Because it's starting to feel remarkably real. Before I could respond, Dante's voice cut through the moment. Bernardo, a word about Wednesday's shipment? The spell broke. Bernardo stepped back, his expression shifting to business neutrality so quickly I wondered if I'd imagined the heat in his eyes. Of course. Michelle, would you excuse me? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He pressed a kiss to my temple for show. I reminded myself and walked away, leaving me gripping the railing like it was the only solid thing in a suddenly unstable world. Through the terrace doors, I watched him talk with Dante, every line of his body controlled and commanding. A man who held power with the same ease most people held their morning coffee. A man who just made me forget, for one dangerous moment, that this was all pretend. Maria appeared beside me with a knowing look. You should rest, dear. Tomorrow will be complicated. Tomorrow, I echoed, still watching Bernardo. Tomorrow, I'd remember this was business. Tonight, I'd lie awake remembering how his hand felt on my hip and wonder what the hell I was doing. When does pretending become reality? Have you ever played a role so well you forgot where the act ended and the truth began? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your take. The next morning, I found Bernardo in his office staring at financial documents with the kind of intensity that suggested he'd been there all night. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually immaculate appearance had frayed at the edges, wrinkled shirt, tie discarded, jaw shadowed with stubble. Did you sleep at all? I asked from the doorway. He looked up, and something in his expression shifted when he saw me. I'd borrowed clothes from the wardrobe again, jeans and a simple blouse, but his gaze lingered like I was still wearing that blue dress. Dante made a call after dinner. To Giacomo. He pushed a tablet across the desk showing a call log. 37 minutes. They're panicking. Good. That was the point. I moved closer, studying the data. Did you trace what they discussed? Carefully worded business talk. But the subtext was clear, they know something has shifted. That I'm paying closer attention. He leaned back, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. Tonight's operation needs to be perfect. No room for error. Then you need to rest. You can't function on, I checked the time. 4 hours of sleep in 2 days. I've managed on less. That's not managing. That's surviving. I recognized the pattern too well, pushing through exhaustion because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling things you'd rather avoid. When's the last time you took a real break? Did something that wasn't about business or strategy or staying 3 steps ahead? He looked at me like I'd asked him to translate ancient Greek. I don't have the luxury of breaks, Miss Blair. Michelle. You called me Michelle last night. Multiple times. Very convincingly. I sat on the edge of his desk, invading his carefully controlled space. And everyone has the luxury of breaks. You just choose not to take them. Because people like me don't get to be careless. One moment of inattention, and he stopped himself, jaw tightening. And what? And people die. Businesses fail. Families fracture. He stood abruptly, walking to the window. You asked last night if the touching bothered me. The truth? Everything about you bothers me, Michelle. You walked into my world by accident and somehow managed to expose cracks I've spent years hiding. The admission hung between us, raw and unexpected. Maybe that's not a bad thing, I said quietly. Maybe those cracks needed exposing. He turned to face me, and the vulnerability in his expression made my chest ache. You called me useless in front of my men. No one's spoken to me that way since my father died. Everyone else is too afraid or too calculating. They see what I can do for them, what I can take away. You saw what I'd missed. I saw one oversight. That doesn't make you useless, doesn't it? I built an empire on control, on knowing everything that happens in my organization. And my own cousin has been robbing me blind for months while I sat reading newspapers and pretending I had everything handled. His laugh was bitter. You were right to mock me. I slid off the desk and moved to stand in front of him, close enough to see gold flecks in his dark eyes. I was terrified and desperate. I said what I needed to say to survive. But for what it's worth, the fact that you're angry at yourself for missing it proves you're not useless. Useless people don't care when they fail. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest. You want people who tell you the truth instead of what you want to hear? Here's truth, you're brilliant and terrifying and so isolated you don't know what normal human connection looks like anymore. His eyes narrowed. And you're an expert on my connections? I'm an expert on loneliness. I recognize it because I live it too. I held his gaze. Difference is, I have Liam. I have Rosa. I have people who care if I come home, who'd notice if I disappeared. Who do you have, Bernardo? Who actually cares about you instead of what you can do for them? The question landed like a physical blow. He stepped back, walls slamming into place so fast I almost heard them. That's not relevant to tonight's operation. It's relevant to everything. You're about to confront your cousin family, who betrayed you. That's going to hurt whether you admit it or not. I don't have the luxury of being hurt. Everyone has that luxury. You just won't let yourself take it. I grabbed my phone, making a decision that was probably stupid but felt necessary. Come with me. Where? My apartment. You wanted to understand my world? Come see it. See what normal looks like for people who don't have armed guards and mansions. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. I have preparations to finalize, which can wait 2 hours. Your men are handling logistics. Dante and Giacomo aren't moving until tonight. And you need perspective before you walk into that warehouse. I was already heading for the door. Besides, Liam wants to go home and get his favorite stuffed astronaut. You can drive us. I don't drive myself. Today you do. Unless the great Bernardo Fiorentino is afraid of a 40-minute round trip to a normal neighborhood. Challenge sparked in his eyes, and I knew I'd hooked him. Fine. 2 hours. Then we return and focus on business. Deal. An hour later, Bernardo's Mercedes looked absurdly out of place parked in front of my building in a neighborhood where luxury meant a car that started reliably. He'd insisted Marco follow in a second vehicle, basic security, he'd said, but agreed to leave the obvious weapons behind. Liam bounced up the stairs ahead of us, excited to show off his room to Mr. Bernardo. I watched Bernardo take in the peeling paint, the flickering hallway light, the apartment that fit entirely in his estate's entrance hall. It's small, I said, suddenly defensive. But it's ours. It's safe. It's honest, he replied, and something in his voice made me look at him. He was studying the space with an expression I couldn't quite read, not judgment, but something closer to longing. Liam dragged him to his room, proudly displaying his collection of space books and model rockets arranged with military precision. Bernardo listened with surprising patience as my son explained the difference between various NASA missions, asked intelligent questions, seemed genuinely interested. You know a lot about this, Bernardo said, examining a model of the International Space Station. Mommy says if I study hard, I can be an astronaut someday, even though we don't have money for special schools. Liam said it matter-of-factly, without resentment. She says smart matters more than money. Your mother is a wise woman. I watched from the doorway as this dangerous man sat cross-legged on my son's floor, discussing orbital mechanics with a 9-year-old, and felt something crack open in my chest. This was what normal looked like. Connection without transaction. Interest without agenda. After Liam found his stuffed astronaut, a battered thing named Commander Fluff, I made coffee in my cramped kitchen while Bernardo studied the photographs covering my refrigerator. Liam at various ages. Report cards. Artwork. The documented evidence of a life built from determination and love instead of money. He looks like you, Bernardo said, pointing to a photo of baby Liam. Same stubborn expression. He is stubborn. Comes with the territory. I handed him coffee in a chipped mug that probably cost less than his watch. His father left before he was born. Decided parenthood wasn't compatible with his music career. His loss. That's what I tell myself. I leaned against the counter, watching him in my space, this powerful man looking somehow smaller and more human surrounded by my ordinary life. This is what you asked about. Who cares if I come home? Liam cares. Rosa across the hall cares. Mrs. Chin downstairs cares because I help her with grocery shopping. It's not glamorous, but it's real. Bernardo was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee like it held answers. My father used to say that power requires sacrifice. That caring too much about individuals makes you weak, exploitable. So I learned not to care. To see people as assets or threats, never just people. That sounds lonely. It's practical. But his voice lacked conviction. Dante was the closest thing I had to a brother. We grew up together. I trusted him with everything. And he betrayed me for money. What does that say about caring? That he's a bastard. Not that caring is wrong. I moved to stand beside him, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. You're hurt. That's what betrayal feels like when you actually care about someone. If he were just an asset, you'd be angry. But you're hurt, which means he mattered. He stopped, jaw working. I don't know how to do this. How to be this. Human. Vulnerable. It's a liability I can't afford. It's also what makes life worth living. I touched his hand, just briefly. Those cracks I exposed? They're not weaknesses. They're proof you're still human under all that control. That you can still feel things even when you've convinced yourself you shouldn't. He turned to face me fully, and the rawness in his expression stole my breath. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying. But the alternative is spending your life surrounded by people who fear you and no one who actually knows you. You're not afraid of me. I'm terrified of you. I'm just more afraid of wasting my one life being someone I'm not. I held his gaze. Question is, are you? Before he could answer, Liam bounded in with Commander Fluff, chattering about whether we could swim in the pool again. The moment shattered, but something had shifted. I saw it in the way Bernardo looked at my son, at my tiny kitchen, at the life I'd built from nothing. On the drive back to the estate, he was quieter than usual. At a stoplight, he finally spoke. Thank you. For what? For showing me what I've been missing. He glanced at me, vulnerable and guarded simultaneously. And for caring enough to call me useless when I needed to hear it. Anytime you need humbling, I'm your girl. He smiled, genuine and unguarded, and my heart did something dangerous in my chest. Tonight he'd face his cousin's betrayal. But right now, in this moment, he looked almost at peace. And I realized I was in serious trouble. We returned to the estate at 4:30 to find chaos. Marco met us at the entrance, face pale, gun drawn. Mr. Fiorentino, we have a situation. Every muscle in Bernardo's body went rigid. What situation? It's the boy, I didn't hear the rest. I was already running, Liam's astronaut clutched in my hand, terror turning my blood to ice. The house blurred past corridors, stairs, voices shouting. I reached Liam's assigned room to find the door open, the bed empty, the window shattered. Liam. The scream tore from my throat, primal and desperate. Bernardo appeared beside me, barking orders in Italian. Men scattered in all directions. Someone handed him a tablet showing security footage. When? His voice was lethally calm. 18 minutes ago. 3 men, professionals. They breached the perimeter at the eastern gate, disabled 2 guards, and extracted through the gardens. Marco looked sick. Maria was drugged but alive. They left this. He held out a phone, not mine, a burner. One text message glowed on the screen, the ledger and the woman for the boy. Midnight. Pier 7. Come alone or he dies. The world tilted sideways. My son. My baby. In the hands of men who drugged a grandmother and shot their way into a fortified estate. Images flooded my mind. Liam scared, crying, calling for me. Liam hurt. Liam, Michelle. Bernardo's hands gripped my shoulders, forcing me to focus on his face. Breathe. I will get him back. They took my son. My voice sounded distant, wrong. They took Liam. I know. And we will retrieve him. His eyes held mine, fierce and certain. I swear to you, we will bring him home. Something shifted inside me then. The panic didn't disappear, it crystallized into something cold and sharp and absolutely clear. I'd spent 9 years protecting my child through poverty and exhaustion and single parenthood. I'd faced down this man in a warehouse with nothing but desperation and a sharp tongue. No one took my son and lived. Show me the footage again, I said, my voice steady now. Clinical. Bernardo released me slowly, watching my face. Michelle, show me the footage. He handed me the tablet. I watched once, twice, 3 times. 3 men in dark tactical gear moving with military precision. They knew exactly where to breach, which guards to avoid, which room held Liam. This wasn't opportunistic, it was planned. They had the security schedule, I said, rewinding to watch the eastern gate breach again. They knew the guard rotation, the blind spots and camera coverage. Someone gave them the layout. Dante. Bernardo's jaw tightened. He's been here dozens of times. He knows the estate's weaknesses. No. I zoomed in on one of the attackers, on the way he moved, the weapon he carried. Look at their equipment. That's military-grade gear, not street muscle. And the timing, you were supposed to be here when they struck. They waited until we left. They were watching the house. They've probably been watching for days. I pulled up my photos of the ledger, cross-referencing dates. Here. 3 days ago, Giacomo had a delivery scheduled at the same time Dante visited. What if this isn't just about covering up theft? What if they're selling information to someone bigger? Bernardo took the tablet, his expression darkening as he connected the same dots. If Dante's selling access to my security protocols, my shipment schedules, he's not just stealing money. He's selling you out to your competitors. I met his eyes. And they just made this personal. What do you need? His question was immediate, no hesitation. Your best men. Complete schematics of Pier 7. Every piece of information you have on Dante's contacts. The analytical part of my brain had taken over, the same part that had decoded the ledger, that had survived on pattern recognition and strategic thinking. And I need you to trust me. You're not going to that pier. The hell I'm not. They want me and the ledger. So they'll get me and the ledger. I stepped closer, voice dropping. But not the way they expect. For a long moment, we stared at each other. Then something like respect crossed his face, the same expression he'd worn when I'd called him useless, when I'd proven I had information he needed. Tell me your plan. I laid it out, using the tablet to mark positions and timing. Bernardo listened without interrupting, his men gathering around as I talked. I'd never done anything like this. Planned an operation, coordinated armed response. But I'd spent years anticipating guest needs 3 steps ahead, managing logistics for events with hundreds of moving parts. This was just logistics with higher stakes. When I finished, one of Bernardo's men, a scar-faced veteran named Paolo, actually smiled. She thinks like a soldier. She thinks like a mother, Bernardo corrected. Which is considerably more dangerous. The next 6 hours blurred into preparation. I memorized the pier layout, learned basic communication protocols, let someone teach me how to wear a wire that wouldn't be detected in a pat-down. Bernardo wanted to outfit me with body armor, but I refused. They'll check for that. I need to look scared and compliant, not prepared. I pulled on dark jeans and a jacket, strapping a small blade to my ankle, the only weapon I'd accept. I'm bait, remember? Bait doesn't come armored. Michelle, Bernardo caught my arm as I headed for the door. His control had fractured at the edges, genuine fear showing through. If something goes wrong, it won't. If it does, then you get Liam out first. Promise me. I gripped his hand, needing him to understand. Whatever happens to me, you get my son to safety. That's the only thing that matters. His fingers tightened on mine. You matter. I'm his mother. He's my world. Nothing else. My voice cracked despite my control. Promise me, Bernardo. I promise. He pulled me close, and for a moment, I let myself lean into his strength, breathing in cedar and smoke and safety. But we're bringing you both home. That's my promise. At 11:30, we drove to Pier 7 in silence. The industrial waterfront was deserted, shipping containers stacked like metal towers, the water black and endless beyond the docks. Bernardo's men were already in position, invisible but present, waiting for my signal. The burner phone buzzed at 11:55, walked to the end of Pier 7. Alone. Hands visible. I looked at Bernardo one last time. He was in tactical gear now, every inch the dangerous man I'd first met in that warehouse. But his eyes held something different: concern, respect, something that might have been more if we'd met under different circumstances. Bring our boy home, he said quietly. Our boy. Not your son. Our. I nodded and stepped out of the car, the ledger tucked under my arm, walking toward the pier where my son waited with men who'd made the fatal mistake of thinking a single mother was an easy target. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. The cold rage that had sustained me for 6 hours crystallized into absolute focus. I reached the end of the pier and waited, counting seconds, trusting Bernardo's positioning, trusting myself. A spotlight hit me from a boat 20 yards offshore. The ledger. Throw it in the water. Where's my son? My voice carried across the water, clear and unwavering. Safe. For now. The ledger first. I held it up. You get this when I see Liam. Alive. Unharmed. That's the deal. A pause. Then a small figure was pushed to the boat's railing, and my heart stopped. Liam. Looking scared but alive, Commander Fluff clutched in his arms. Mommy. His voice broke something inside me and reformed it into steel. I'm here, baby. Everything's going to be okay. Touching, a familiar voice called out. Dante stepped into the light, and rage burned through me so pure I tasted copper. Now throw the ledger in the water, or your son learns to swim the hard way. I met Dante's eyes across the distance. You made a mistake. Really? I'm the one holding your child. No. I smiled, cold and certain. You're the one who pissed off a mother with nothing left to lose. And you're standing exactly where I need you to be. I dropped the ledger and touched my ear. Now. The night exploded with light and sound. Searchlights from 3 positions hit the boat simultaneously, turning night into day and blind confusion. Bernardo's men emerged from containers like ghosts, weapons trained on the vessel. 2 speedboats roared to life from hidden positions, cutting off escape routes. Dante's men scrambled, but they'd been outmaneuvered before they realized the game had changed. Liam, get down. I screamed as gunfire cracked across the water. My son dropped to the deck, smart boy, my brilliant boy, as Bernardo's team swarmed the boat. I was already running down the pier, every maternal instinct overriding basic survival. Someone grabbed my arm, trying to pull me back to safety. Let go. I twisted free, not caring about bullets or tactics or anything except reaching Liam. Then Bernardo was there, moving past me with lethal grace, boarding the boat before his own men. I watched him fight, precise, brutal, efficient, taking down 2 of Dante's guards with movements that spoke of training I couldn't imagine. Within 90 seconds, the boat was secured, 4 men zip-tied on the deck, 1 bleeding from a shoulder wound. Dante stood in the center with his hands raised, that calculated smile finally cracked into fear. Liam. I clambered onto the boat, nearly falling, catching myself on the railing. My son launched himself into my arms, and I held him so tight he squeaked. Mommy, you came. They said you wouldn't, but I knew. Baby, I've got you. I've always got you. I buried my face in his hair, breathing him in, checking for injuries with shaking hands. Did they hurt you? No. They were mean, but they didn't. His voice wobbled. I was scared. I know. It's over now. I looked up at Bernardo over Liam's head, and the expression on his face, relief and rage and something tender, made my chest ache. "Get them to shore," Bernardo ordered, his eyes never leaving Dante. "All of them. We're taking this somewhere more private." 20 minutes later, we reconvened in a warehouse 3 blocks from the pier. Not the same warehouse where I'd first met Bernardo, but close enough that the symmetry wasn't lost on me. Dante and his 4 accomplices were restrained in metal chairs, surrounded by armed men. Giacomo was already there, having been picked up during the pier operation. Apparently, he'd been waiting at a secondary location, ready to clean up after Dante completed the exchange. I sat with Liam in a corner office that overlooked the main floor, Maria having appeared with blankets and hot chocolate like she'd been preparing for this exact scenario. My son was finally calming, Commander Fluff tucked under his chin, exhaustion winning over adrenaline. "Is Mr. Bernardo going to hurt those men?" Liam asked quietly. I thought about lying, about shielding him from the reality of what was about to happen. But my son was smart, and he deserved truth in doses he could handle. "Mr. Bernardo is going to make sure they can never hurt anyone again," I said carefully. "Sometimes protecting people means being very serious with bad people." They took me from my room. They broke the window. "I know, baby." I wasn't scared at first. I thought maybe it was a game, like a drill. His voice got smaller. "But then they put tape on my mouth and I couldn't call for you, and I got really scared." Rage flared fresh and hot. I pulled him closer. "You were so brave. So smart. You did everything right. You came for me. Always. Every single time. There is nowhere in this world you could be that I wouldn't come for you." I kissed his forehead. That's what mothers do. Through the office window, I watched Bernardo approach Dante. Even from this distance, I could read the body language, controlled fury in every line of Bernardo's posture, panic creeping into Dante's. "I should be out there," I murmured. "You should be with your son," Maria said gently, appearing with a chair. "Let Mr. Fiorentino handle this part. You've done enough." But I couldn't look away. This was my fight too. My son they'd taken. My life they'd disrupted. Bernardo circled Dante slowly, and even without hearing the words, I recognized the dynamic. This was the same calculated intimidation I'd experienced in that first warehouse, except now Dante was the one sweating, the one searching for mercy in faces that offered none. "Why?" Bernardo's voice carried up to the office, cold and precise. 12 years, Dante. 12 years of family, of trust. "Why?" "You don't understand," Dante started. "Then explain. Make me understand why you sold me out to the Russo family. Why you stole from your own blood. Why you thought taking a child was acceptable leverage. The Russos offered triple what you pay. They wanted your routes, your contacts, your security protocols. It was just business," the slap echoed through the warehouse. Bernardo had moved so fast I almost missed it, his hand connecting with Dante's face with controlled violence. "Business." Bernardo's voice dropped to barely audible. "You justified kidnapping a 9-year-old child as business." "I didn't order that." Giacomo got overzealous. "Do not blame your accomplice for your cowardice." Bernardo crouched to eye level with his cousin. "You gave them everything they needed. The security schedules. The estate layout. You made this possible. Own it." Dante's composure finally shattered. "What was I supposed to do?" "You have everything, Bernardo. The business, the respect, the legacy. I'm just the cousin, the lawyer, the one who cleans up your messes. I wanted something of my own. So you took mine." Bernardo stood, and the disappointment in his posture was somehow worse than anger. "Family meant nothing to you. Loyalty was just a word. And a child's safety was collateral damage in your ambition. What are you going to do?" Dante's voice climbed toward hysteria. "Kill me? I'm blood, Bernardo. I'm family. You stopped being family when you betrayed everything it means." Bernardo turned to his men. "Take them. All of them. Let the Russo family know we're returning their investment with interest." Understanding dawned on Dante's face, horror and desperation. "No. No. Bernardo, please, anything but that. You wanted to work for the Russos? Congratulations. They're about to receive 5 men who attempted to play both sides. I'm sure they'll be very understanding about the failure. It was brilliant and brutal. The Russo family would tear Dante apart for the botched operation, for the exposure, for making them vulnerable to retaliation. No quick death, no mercy, just the slow destruction of everything Dante had tried to build with his betrayal. Dante was screaming now, begging, offering information and money and anything to avoid his fate. Bernardo ignored him, walking away as his men dragged all 5 conspirators toward waiting vehicles. Then he was climbing the stairs to the office, and the dangerous crime lord facade fell away the moment he saw Liam. "Hey, astronaut," he said gently, crouching beside our chair. "You okay?" Liam nodded against my shoulder. "You saved me. You and Mommy. Your mom saved you. I just provided backup." Bernardo's eyes met mine over Liam's head. "She's the bravest person I know." "She is," Liam agreed solemnly. "She always saves me." I noticed. Bernardo stood, offering me his hand. "Let's go home. Both of you. Home." He said it like the estate was ours, like we belonged there. The drive back was quiet, Liam falling asleep within minutes, exhaustion finally claiming him. I held him in the back seat while Bernardo sat up front with Marco, making calls in rapid Italian that I didn't try to translate. At the estate, Bernardo carried Liam upstairs himself, laying him gently on the bed in the room with the broken window, now repaired, new locks installed. I tucked my son in, kissing his forehead and watching his chest rise and fall with the deep breathing of safe sleep. "He'll have nightmares," I whispered. "Probably." Bernardo stood in the doorway, watching us. "But he'll also remember that his mother moved heaven and earth to save him. That's what he'll carry forward." I followed him out, leaving the door cracked so I could hear if Liam woke. In the hallway, the adrenaline finally crashed, leaving me shaking and exhausted and overwhelmed. "You were right," Bernardo said quietly. "About the cracks, about being useless. I built an empire on control and missed what mattered: loyalty that's genuine instead of enforced. Trust that's earned instead of demanded. Tonight, you showed me what real strength looks like. Not power. Not intimidation. Just a mother who refused to let anything stop her from saving her child." I had help. My voice was rough. "If you hadn't positioned your men, if you hadn't trusted my plan, I trusted you because you proved yourself trustworthy. Not through fear or obligation, but through action." He stepped closer, and the intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. "You walked into my world by accident, Michelle Blair. But you've changed it deliberately. Changed me. Bernardo, I want you to stay. Both of you. Not as prisoners or obligations, but as..." He stopped, searching for words. "As something I didn't know I needed until a sharp-tongued single mother laughed in my face and called me useless." My heart hammered against my ribs. What are we talking about here? Partnership. Protection. A chance to finish your degree while working on something that matters. A safe home for Liam. And his hand cupped my cheek with surprising gentleness. A chance to see what happens when 2 people who started as enemies discover they work better together than apart. That sounds complicated. That sounds like the only thing that's made sense since you opened that damn package. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "But I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we talk about the future. If you want one." He was giving me space when he could have pushed. Offering choice when he could have demanded. It was possibly the most seductive thing he could have done. "Tomorrow," I agreed. "We'll talk tomorrow." He nodded and started to turn away. I caught his hand. "Bernardo? Thank you. For keeping your promise. For bringing us both home. Always," he said simply. "That's what family does. Family. Not employees. Not assets. Family." I watched him disappear down the hall, then slipped back into Liam's room, curling up beside my sleeping son. Tomorrow we'd figure out what came next. Tomorrow I'd decide if the life Bernardo offered was real or just another beautiful cage. Tonight we were safe. We were together. That was enough. Have you ever discovered strength you didn't know you had when someone you loved was threatened? What would you risk everything for? Subscribe to find out how Michelle's story ends. 3 months later, I stood in the penthouse office of Fiorentino Holdings, the legitimate side of Bernardo's empire, reviewing financial discrepancies that would have been invisible to anyone without forensic training. The view stretched across the city, morning sun glinting off glass towers, a world away from cramped hotel offices and desperation. Found another one, I called out, highlighting a transaction buried in subsidiary reports. Someone in procurement is skimming equipment purchases. Small amounts, but it's been consistent for 6 weeks. Bernardo appeared in the doorway with coffee, a habit he developed after learning I function better with caffeine, and leaned over my shoulder to study the screen. His proximity still sent electricity down my spine, though now I let myself acknowledge it instead of pushing it away. How much total? 47,000. They're getting bolder. I pulled up a comparison chart. Same pattern as before, small, regular amounts that look like normal variance until you map them over time. And you mapped them in under an hour. He set the coffee beside me, his hand lingering on my shoulder. I'm starting to think hiring you was the smartest business decision I've ever made. Just business. I glanced up at him, one eyebrow raised. Strategically brilliant on multiple fronts. His smile was warm, the dangerous edges softened by genuine affection. Michelle Blair, Chief Financial Investigator. The woman who rebuilt my operation from the inside out. It still felt surreal sometimes. The title, the salary that had made me choke on my coffee when he first proposed it, the office 2 doors down from his. The chance to finally finish my degree online classes that the company paid for, scheduled around school pickups and Liam's soccer practice. The partnership that had evolved from desperate alliance into something that felt increasingly like forever. Speaking of operations, I said, pulling up another file. The quarterly report shows we've successfully divested from 3 more questionable ventures. The shipping container business is now entirely legitimate, the warehouse properties are being converted to commercial rental, and I know what the reports say. I signed off on them. Bernardo pulled up a chair beside me instead of retreating to his own desk. Question is, do you believe it? That the change is real. I studied him, this man who'd held a gun to my future, and then handed me the keys to rebuild it. In 3 months, he'd systematically dismantled the shadowy empire his father had built, keeping the legitimate businesses and walking away from everything else. It had cost him allies, respect in certain circles, and the fearsome reputation that had defined him for years. But he'd gained something else. Peace. Purpose. A future that didn't require looking over his shoulder. I believe you're trying, I said carefully. I believe you mean it. But Bernardo, change this big doesn't happen overnight. There are still people loyal to the old ways, still connections that are being systematically severed. I know it's not perfect, Michelle. I know there are loose ends and people who'll resent the transition. But I'm not going back to that life. His hand found mine on the desk. I can't. Not after seeing what the alternative looks like. And what does the alternative look like? You, Liam. Sunday dinners where the most dangerous thing is Maria's insistence that everyone eat thirds. Helping a 9-year-old build model rockets instead of managing territorial disputes. Waking up and not wondering which of my own people might betray me today. He squeezed my fingers. Being useful in ways that actually matter instead of ways that just generate fear. The echo of my own words from that warehouse, how does it feel to be useless, Mr. Mafia Boss, hung between us. I'd meant it as an attack, as survival. He'd taken it as a way-up call. You were never useless, I said quietly. Just lost. Using your skills for the wrong things. I was exactly what you called me, powerful and isolated and convinced that control was the same as strength. You showed me the difference. He stood, pulling me up with him, his hands settling on my waist with casual intimacy that still made my heart race. Question is, are you ready for the next phase? What next phase? Instead of answering, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. My breath caught. Before you panic, he said quickly, this isn't what you think. Or not entirely what you think. Just let me explain first. He opened the box to reveal a key, ornate, old-fashioned, clearly expensive. This is the key to the east wing of the estate. The section that's been closed for renovations. He pressed it into my palm. The renovations are finished. 3 bedrooms, private office, full kitchen. Completely separate entrance if you want privacy, but connected to the main house if you want company. I stared at the key, understanding dawning. You built us an apartment. I built you a home. Inside my home. Where Liam can have space for his expanding rocket collection, where you can spread out your research without fighting for desk space, where you can have independence and security simultaneously. He paused, vulnerability flickering across his features. Where you can stay without feeling like you're giving up your autonomy. If you want to. Bernardo, I know it's only been 3 months. I know this is fast and complicated and you have every reason to be cautious. But Michelle, these have been the best 3 months of my life. Coming home to find Liam's artwork on my refrigerator. Watching you tear apart financial statements with the same fierce focus you bring to everything. Having someone who challenges me and supports me and isn't afraid to call me out when I'm being an idiot. His hands framed my face, thumbs brushing my cheekbones. I don't want this to end. I don't want you to feel pressured to stay because of work or safety or obligation. I want you to stay because you want to be here. My throat tightened with emotion. And if I'm not ready for, I gestured vaguely at us, at the intensity building between us for months. Then we take it slow. The apartment is yours regardless. The job is yours regardless. My protection and support are yours regardless. He smiled, soft and genuine. I'm not my father, Michelle. I'm not demanding loyalty through fear or obligation. I'm asking, hoping that you'll choose to build something with me because you want to, not because you're trapped. I looked at the key in my hand, thinking about the apartment I'd kept across town. The place I'd been returning to on weekends, maintaining as proof I could still leave, still reclaim my old life if this experiment failed. But it wasn't failing. It was thriving in ways I'd never imagined. Liam loved the estate, the space to run, the pool, the library, Maria's endless patience with his questions. He'd stopped having nightmares about the kidnapping after the second week, his resilience astonishing me daily. And he adored Bernardo, who'd somehow become the steady male presence my son had never had. And me? I'd found purpose again. Work that challenged me, that mattered, that let me use skills I'd thought I'd buried forever. Financial security that meant I could breathe, without constantly calculating whether we could afford groceries and rent. A partner who valued my mind as much as my presence. And yes, a man who made me feel things I'd convinced myself I was too practical, too busy, too focused on survival to experience. I want to see it, I said finally. The apartment. Relief and joy crossed his features. Now. He led me through corridors I'd walked 100 times to a door I'd assumed was storage. Beyond it, a staircase spiraled up to a completely renovated space that stole my breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the living area with light. The kitchen was modern and functional, sized for actual cooking instead of display. The office had built-in shelves already loaded with forensic accounting textbooks I recognized from my incomplete degree. And the bedrooms, one clearly designed for a space-obsessed 9-year-old, complete with glow-in-the-dark star maps, were perfect. The master bedroom has a lock, Bernardo said from behind me, his voice careful. Your space. Your privacy. No pressure, no expectations. I turned to face him, this man who'd gone from terrifying captor to unexpected partner to something I was afraid to name, because naming it made it real and precious and potentially losable. You really did all this? For us. I did it because somewhere between you calling me useless and trusting me with your son's life, I realized I'd been building an empire with no one to share it with. No one who saw me instead of what I could provide or what I could take away. He stepped closer, not touching, just present. You see me, Michelle. The good and the broken and everything in between. That's rarer than any fortune I've built. I see you, I agreed. And you scare the hell out of me. Because of who I was? Because of how much I'm starting to need this. Need you. Need what we're building. I pressed the key against my chest. I spent 9 years being completely self-sufficient because needing people meant they could leave, could disappoint, could choose something else over us. And now here you are, offering everything I was too afraid to want, and I'm terrified of believing it's real. It's real. His hands settled on my waist again, grounding and warm. I'm not leaving. I'm not choosing anything over this, over you and Liam and the life we're building. I've had power and fear and an empire that meant nothing without someone to share it with. This matters. You matter. Even when I'm difficult and stubborn and terrible at accepting help? Especially then. Your fire is what saved me, Michelle. I'm not looking to extinguish it. I want to build something strong enough to withstand both our flames. I laughed despite the tears threatening. That was almost poetic. I've been reading more. Liam's been sharing his books. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, genuine joy replacing the calculated control I'd first encountered. Turns out astronauts have excellent philosophies about courage and exploration. About going into unknown territory because the potential discovery is worth the risk. Is that what we are? An exploration. We're a revolution, he corrected. A complete reconstruction of everything I thought I needed into something infinitely better than I imagined possible. His forehead touched mine, breath mingling. So yes, Michelle Blair. I'm asking you to stay. To make this apartment your home. To let me be useful in ways that actually matter, as your partner, your supporter, Liam's protector. As someone who values you for exactly who you are instead of what you can provide. The key felt warm in my hand, tangible proof of possibility. Okay, I whispered. Okay, we'll move in. We'll try this. We'll see what happens when a single mom and a reformed crime lord decide to build something unprecedented. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But Bernardo? If you ever make me regret choosing you, you'll call me useless again. Probably in front of even more people. I know. He grinned. I'm counting on it. Someone needs to keep me honest. Deal. He kissed me then, soft and slow and full of promise, tasting like coffee and new beginnings. When we finally broke apart, breathless and smiling, I could hear Liam's voice echoing up from the main house, asking Maria if Mr. Bernardo was back yet because they had a rocket to finish. Our son is calling, Bernardo said, and the casual possessive made my heart skip. Our son, I repeated, testing the words. When did that happen? Somewhere between me teaching him chess and him deciding I'm tall enough to be astronaut qualified. He asked me last week if I was going to be his dad now. Vulnerability flickered across his features. I told him that was up to his mom, but I'd be honored if she said yes eventually. Eventually, I echoed. Not now. I'm trying to be patient. To do this right instead of demanding everything immediately. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. But yes, Michelle. Eventually, I'd very much like to make this official in every possible way. When you're ready. When Liam's ready. When the timing feels right instead of rushed. I thought about the scared woman who'd opened that package 3 months ago, who'd laughed in a crime lord's face out of desperation, who'd never imagined her life could look like this. I thought about the empire rebuilt on legitimate foundations, the family assembled from choice instead of blood, the future stretching out full of possibility instead of mere survival. Ask me again in 6 months, I said. When we've proven this isn't just adrenaline and proximity. When we've survived regular life, bills and homework and ordinary Tuesdays, as well as we survived kidnappings and betrayals. 6 months, he agreed. But I'm not waiting 6 months for this. He kissed me again, deeper this time, and I let myself fall into it. Into him. Into the improbable, impossible life we were building together. From downstairs, Liam's voice called out again, and we broke apart laughing. Ready to tell him about the apartment? Bernardo asked. Ready to tell him he gets his own space-themed bedroom with a telescope he's going to love way too much for my sleep schedule. We walked downstairs together, hands linked, to find my son covered in paint and grinning about the rocket model he'd been decorating. 3 months ago, I'd been powerless and desperate. Now I was powerful in ways that actually mattered, loved, valued, essential to an empire built on trust instead of fear. And Bernardo Fiorentino, once the most dangerous man I'd ever met, was finally useful in all the right ways. As a partner. As a protector. As family. Hey, Mom. Liam bounded over, paint-covered and perfect. Mr. Bernardo said we might go to the Science Museum this weekend. Can we? Please. I looked at Bernardo over my son's head, at the man who'd gone from captor to savior to something infinitely more complicated and wonderful. Yeah, baby, I said, squeezing Liam's shoulder while holding Bernardo's gaze. I think we can do that. We could do anything. Together, we were unstoppable. And it had all started with one desperate laugh and a single question. How does it feel to be useless, Mr. Mafia Boss? Turns out, he'd been waiting his entire life for someone brave enough to ask. And I'd been waiting my entire life for someone strong enough to hear the answer and change. We'd saved each other. Now we'd build something worth saving. Thank you for listening until the very end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the story. There's another story like the one you just enjoyed on your left screen.